It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Welcome to Secular Sexuality. Today we have probably one of the more unusual podcasts. We are going to be talking to four people who are in, I don't know what kind, but a poly relationship of some kind here. And we're going to be talking to April, whom we heard from back in, I think we recorded it in October. April, was that the case? And then it came out in November. Right. I think we recorded it in October and it came out in November. And she was talking about her journey from being a missionary to being poly. I mean, that's the title of the podcast, Missionary to Poly, which is fucking unbelievable, of course. But you've heard it first here. You heard it first here on the Secular Sexuality podcast. And then we're going to also be talking with Will, her husband, and Kate, who is Will's girlfriend, and Snacks, who is April's boyfriend. And if I get this all confused, just don't hesitate to correct me. I'm challenged sometimes in this area. So thanks for being on, and thanks, April, for reaching out and asking for this kind of follow-up thing, because I'm always curious how these things work out. And we had such a good such a good conversation last time. Now, to my right is Candace, and she's going to be joining me this week. She is the author of an excellent book. I want to plug it. It's called Ebony Exodus, and it deals with issues around black women leaving religion, which you can imagine that's challenging. So welcome, Candace. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me, Darrell. Hey, everybody. I wanted to say, April, I did get a chance to listen to your podcast before we started here, your previous episode, and I really enjoyed it. It really was, being polyamorous myself, I just really connected to all of the, I really appreciated how emotionally honest you were, and so I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and there were some things that you said about Will as well, and some of your difficulties, Will, and kind of making some connections yourself that I can kind of identify with. So I'm looking forward to those aspects of the conversations. It was really good. I really enjoyed hearing it.
Candace is a psychotherapist as well. So as we're listening, we listened to the podcast together, and we were both impressed with the mindfulness training that was clearly evident in April, in the way April expressed it all. So great. We both had a good. We're training people this shit all the time, so it's nice to see people actually using it.
Exactly. When I heard you say DBT, I was like, "Oh, excuse me, listen to her."
Thank you.
Okay, so let's begin here. I'd like to get April to give us just a 5-minute overview of what's gone on. So, for our listeners, in case, and I would encourage you to go back and listen because it was an amazing conversation just between April and I. But go back to episode 85, From Missionary to Poly, sometime around November 2017, and listen to that. But don't do that right now. Listen to what we got to say now. So I'm going to turn it over to April for about 5 minutes and give us an update. What's gone on since you and I talked last?
Well, thank you for having us back. I'm super excited to be here. I think one important thing I wanted to mention is that originally when I reached out to you, the intention was that we were going to talk to you as a poly group, as a polycule. And at that time, we cut...
A cat just wanted to join the Polycule. I didn't know you guys were into that kind of shit.
We're into a lot of weird stuff. Yeah. So at that time, we wanted to talk to you as a polycule. But as your listeners will listen to these that old episode, you'll find that at that time I was struggling a lot with jealousy, and I couldn't be in the same room with Kate. And I was having a really rough go of it. So this is kind of a celebration for me and for what we've, what I alone have achieved to work. Just kidding, by the way, totally just kidding. What I've achieved through the jealousy stuff, and so this is the podcast we'd originally hoped on doing, but I had to do it by myself at first. But anyway, so summary being, since then, we, as in I, as in us, we've continued to do a lot of work, talking a lot about feelings and jealousy and consent and honesty, and how we make this all work and how we continue to be respectful and live out those beliefs that we have about non-monogamy, about, open relationships and stuff when all of our feelings are getting in the way. So, since then, it's just been a lot of more of the same, but a lot of progress forward. Being able to enjoy our time together, going out on, we have things now called Z nights. Since we call ourselves a Z because that's the shape of our polycule.
Right.
We could have called ourselves the N's, but I think Z is much sexier. So we're the Z's, and we go out on Z nights now and then, and we go and get a beer and talk about our agreements amongst ourselves. And so we've been moving forward really well, and I feel really good about this. What else can I say? I'm only mildly nervous right now. You're all here.
Well, I've never noticed you to be at a loss of words in a couple times. So.
Did I say you could talk during my podcast?
Well, great. That's a good summary. So let's move to Will, because obviously you're married, and she talked about you a lot. And of course, want to get with each. I want each person in the Polycule to give us their perspective, about 5 minutes, and then we'll kind of open up and we'll have a free for all here. So, Will, give us your. I know she had an hour and a half to talk. You only have 5 minutes, so hopefully you can sum it up.
Well, I let her talk for me most of the time, anyways. So, so you want just like where should I start?
Yeah.
You can start wherever you want. We're interested in how this affected you, your emotions, your journey, your understanding, whatever works for you.
Oh boy. Well, the 5-minute version of I think it's the last year now that we've been open, poly, whatever. I don't know. I guess like early on, I struggled a bit, not with jealousy or anything like that. Just not many people want to date a poly dude,
right?
Apparently, and then sometime over the summer, Kate and I we've actually known each other for quite a while, a couple of years, and over a bonfire, we found each other on Tinder. Literally, we were sitting across the fire from each other, and we started going out, and that created all kinds of fun in my relationship with April. I'm gonna struggle with calling her April because I don't do it.
I know.
And so that's been hard. And now I've got a cat. It's been hard. She's always been committed to being open and poly. If you go back and listen to the podcast, you'll hear that she struggled with that, and that's been hard for me navigating. It's been difficult having these two relationships where having the relationship with Kate causes April to have jealousy feelings, and it's the mixed message of no, keep doing the thing that you're doing. It's just going to cause me to struggle. I'm talking for April here, so that's been my biggest struggle.
I'm curious, how did it feel knowing she was already quite established with snacks in that relationship, and you're having trouble finding anybody, and then when you do finally find somebody, she has this breakdown. How did that feel to you?
That was really hard, because she has this established relationship with snacks, and I start having my own relationship, and all of a sudden, now we've got these jealousy problems, and so not owning her feelings around my relationship with Kate, that's probably been my biggest growth area, is not owning somebody else's feelings. but at the same time being respectful of them and, negotiating ways that, don't make them worse.
Right.
But give her space to, work through them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm going to move to snacks next because you were the first to join this Polycule, and you've got quite a bit of experience with this group. And let's just hear how, because you're moving into this, and you're seeing all of this from somewhat of an outsider's perspective, and I'm sure other things you've observed. So let's hear your 5-minute summary of this whole thing in your perspective.
It was February 2017, and there was snow on the ground, and I was just trolling Tinder, doing what single guys do, swiping right, swiping left, etc., and swipe right on April. And it's just an absolute meat market on there. It is what it is. But she actually sent the first message to me, and it was because I had on my profile, I'm looking to be a sidekick to a nasty woman because of the 2016 election and everything like that. So so the relationship was already kind of formed in just by that. It just sort of naturally followed, and I wasn't initially looking to get involved with anybody who is polyamorous. I wasn't opposed to it, obviously, but
did you know what the term meant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm kind of a nerd about that. I go to let's say what is this? The Best of Hump every year. So I'm not I listen to Savage Lovecast and other things like that.
Right.
So I'm familiar with a lot of the different terms.
Okay.
Yeah, and it started just like a regular monogamous relationship. You can go out and grab coffee, go out and it's not really any different. It's just my partner has other partners.
Yeah.
And I'm free to pursue other partners if I so choose.
Right. Okay.
That's all that it really affected me.
As you were watching, I'm sure you were supportive in various ways.
I did do a lot of supporting of April. I'm kind of a natural listener. And I help people problem solve. The way I describe it is it's like my brain always jumps to, ooh, puzzles, or something like that when somebody's trying to describe a problem that they're having and when they're looking for a solution. So that's just kind of how it operates. And I give people space to discuss the things that they want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any specific observations about how she handled it or how Will handled it as an outsider?
I was going to ask Snacks, was there ever a time that you had to look at April and go, well, now, hold on, April, you're being unfair to, Will. Did you ever have to challenge her, or did you ever do that?
All the time. And, if it was the other side of the thing, I would try and determine, I would try and put myself in both sets of shoes behind okay, so I'm only getting half of the story here, but that allows me to ask probing questions to kind of determine if the bias actually holds true or not.
Right.
And, I can reframe things from potentially his perspective to kind of give her a greater deal of insight regarding what his position was, or what his potential position may have been regarding any struggles that occurred.
Good. All right. Well, Kate, are you ready to go?
Oh God. Okay. Totally
all
ready.
Right. So you joined this, and then all hell broke loose after that. To give us your perspective and observations.
I mean, you already know that we started over a bonfire on Tinder, and I jokingly told everyone at the time that I was kind of jokingly told them that I was only swiping right to find out if he had swiped right. And I don't know. I knew them both as friends for several years, and I knew when they opened up their marriage, April talked to me about that at some point, and I was just like, okay, cool. It never even slightly occurred to me that I would date Will because he's a terrifying human being.
Oh my gosh.
Only in the ways that count.
No, but like when I first met him, he was like very gruff, and I was just like, oh, okay, he's a scary person. I don't know. I feel like I've had it kind of easy because I was already friends with April. And so, like, anytime she was having issues, I would just be like, I want to help. I want to make it better. And I never really had to deal with a lot of jealousy myself because they were married when I met them. And so I was coming into it knowing, like, full well what I was getting myself into, which I think helped.
And were you aware of how you knew what poly was, or how much did you know about poly?
I knew their marriage. Like, I had no experience with poly, anything other than completely monogamous relationships until they opened up their marriage. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, like, whatever, if you guys are happy, that's cool. Yeah. I had never considered it for myself. Okay. And we see how well that worked out for me.
All right. So you hadn't even, that wasn't even on the radar, and now you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting.
And it's all Will's fault.
When April, she said in the previous episode, podcast when she and I talked, she said she decided to sit down with you and share her feelings, but not dump them on you, not project them on you. I'm curious how that conversation affected you. Do you remember that conversation?
I remember having a couple different conversations where she would, like, I mean, I don't think it was a specific conversation necessarily, more of like an ongoing, hey, this is the feeling that I'm having right now, and you don't have to do anything about it, but I just wanted to let you know. Okay. And I'd be like, okay, and then I would be racked with guilt for like a week and not say anything. I'd be like, oh God, I'm ruining my friend's marriage. I'm better now. Okay, good. Okay.
So despite her telling you don't have to do anything, just giving you that information evoked guilt in you.
Yeah, because I mean, it was like what Will was saying earlier. I didn't want to hurt her because she's my friend, but also she brought this upon herself. That's fair.
Right.
Candace and I were listening to it together, and one of the things we were so impressed with was how you'd owned your feelings, April, but then you were telling other people, and what we didn't get was how they responded to that. And now hearing that Kate felt guilty, were you aware of that guilt that you had induced in her when you did that?
I'm not sure. Maybe I had an idea that maybe you did, but you're very conservative with the expression of your feelings. And so then it was full circle, because then it was like, if you're having feelings about my feelings, then I'm not going to own those feelings. Exactly. So it was perfect. Especially if you don't tell me about them. Yep. So it's fine.
Well, it does get really tangled up, or it can if you're not careful. That's cool. So,
I mean, well, what would keep you from sharing your feelings with them? Because, I would think that part of, in some situations, part of the reason that you don't share your feelings with other people is because you don't want them to worry about your feelings. Like, you don't want them to own your feelings. You don't want them to feel guilty. You do. You just want to share your feelings, and you want them to just say, okay, those are your feelings. Thank you for sharing. So if you, April, weren't necessarily aware that either Will or Kate might feel guilt when you shared your feelings, what were some of the things that were causing you to kind of hold back, from sharing your feelings?
I would say it's that exact same thing. Like, I was owning his potential feelings. Like I was afraid that he wasn't going to be able to handle it, or that we wouldn't be able to talk through it, or I just didn't know how he was going to react. And plus, I think it was that, plus it was being afraid of how he was going to react, that it was going to be too much, that he was going to own my feelings. So instead, I owned his feelings preemptively by not telling him. That was me owning his feelings instead of letting him hear what I had to say, giving us the opportunity to talk through it, and then just being able to work it out that way. So, so it's that, and then it was also a lot of jealousy kept me from connecting with him during that particular time. And I just, despite being very aware of what my feelings were and where they were from, being able to rationalize them and think about them in a mindful way, it was still affecting how I felt emotionally about Will. Like I, despite all of that, I wanted to stay away from him. I wanted to keep distance from him because it hurt, because the jealousy was still there, regardless of how I was handling it, regardless of whether I was talking about it, or regardless of whether I was asking people to own my feelings or not projecting on people. I still felt that distance and still this hurt. So it still affected our connectedness, regardless of how masterful I am at DBT and how much I can impress two psychologists with my skills. The feelings still really hurt, and that caused a rift. And that was a huge part of what got in the way during that particular segment of handling the worst of the jealousy, I would say.
So like a combination of, you don't want him to own your feelings, but then at the same time, you're so jealous, or, you were just really alienated from him, and you felt like no connection to go to him yourself anyway.
Yeah. Like I purposely created distance because I was feeling hurt. I didn't feel like I could trust him. I didn't feel like we had the same connection as before, despite the fact that I would tell him, go to your girlfriend's house now. So I promoted all the behavior. I didn't ask him to change a damn thing, but my feelings still felt it in the end. And that caused me to have to behave in a way that was only authentic for me, which was to push him away.
Right. I'm throwing here a kind of a side curveball here for the whole group. One thing I've noticed from our earlier talk is April loves to process her feelings and talk through things. Am I correct?
Yep.
No.
Oh, absolutely.
Shut up, you guys. Shut up.
You don't get to answer this.
So the question,
but I have feelings I need to talk about.
the question here is that it's pretty rare to have somebody that, one, wants to process as much, and two, has the skills to do it. And now we got three other people that she's expecting to do all of this. And that's asking a hell of a lot of the other three people. April, you keep quiet here. I'm going to ask the other three, how does it feel to have to constantly process April's emotions with her or with you? I don't care which way it goes. I'm just curious because it's pretty.
How complex? How difficult is it to be part of that process? You're walking along this process while she's in therapy.
Yeah.
Because it's like as she changes, now everybody around her is.
This is Snacks. I'll jump on a landmine here.
Jump on it. Take the sword for the rest of them.
For me, it's not really that, because she already goes to the people who she wants to go to talk about things where she wants to utilize their various skills. So she's having difficulty processing her feelings regarding something. So, like, if she wants somebody who will just sit there and listen and be reflective, she will go to Will. If she wants somebody who will try and help her figure something out and will challenge her on different things, she'll likely come to me. Okay. And I don't know entirely what she goes to Kate for, probably problems involving both of us. I don't know.
Yeah, she actually talks to me about how much she doesn't like you guys.
Mostly.
That's fair. I'm kind of an asshole,
yeah. So as the party that's married to April, as Snacks alluded to, he and I have different ways of processing and handling conflict. I like space and time, and like I will think problems to death. That's what I do. And April has a much different need in conflict. So I think part of what we struggled with, April and I, is like finding a common ground with which to process the feelings and like figure out how to communicate around the jealousy. And we've actually spent a lot of time figuring that out. And it's been an area where I think both of us have had to do a lot of work and grow in the way we handle it and the way that we respond to the other in those moments. So being a not reactive person, somebody that likes to think and process, one of the things that I've been meeting in the middle on is not waiting a half an hour to have a response when she asks me a question.
But she expects a response immediately if possible. Is that what you're saying?
It's what she likes. I'm never going to get there to be, like immediate response. And that's something that she's been coping with.
Right.
And doing work around is giving me a little more space than she would naturally like to to process and come up with a response whenever we have some sort of not an argument, just an issue of conflict or emotion to work through.
And it's interesting because that's a problem. Anybody in any relationship, whether it's monogamous or otherwise, it's not unique to poly, is it? Learning to get...
No, it's definitely come up a lot more since we opened our marriage up. Because we've been married for coming up on 7 years, 6 years, 6 years.
Yeah,
we've been together for almost 8, married for almost 6.
You on shaky ground, Will. You on shaky ground. That's what, you don't even know how many years you've been married. Come on, you got to step up your game, man.
I am sitting between two women who are looking at each other, shaking their heads.
I don't know how long you've been married.
All of the women sitting here shaking.
Yeah.
You're lucky to make it to 7. Well,
and this is another thing that everybody in the Polycule is they pick on me.
They do. You're the sacrificial lamb, are you?
I guess so. But before we opened up our marriage, we did have some of the same issues with talking about conflict, but we definitely had a lot more things to talk about in that regard since opening up.
Right. Cool. Go ahead.
Kate?
I don't know.
Kate?
What was the question? How do you feel that I make you talk about all your feelings?
Yeah,
Darrell Ray wants to pit us all against each other.
April, you're not allowed to talk.
Okay, fine. I don't know. I mostly don't talk about my feelings, I guess. I journal extensively. I don't know. I've never really had a problem with April talking to me about her feelings. Like, I appreciate when she tells me stuff, even if it's like, oh, I feel horrible today and it's your fault. Like, thank you for telling me. Love you. No, I honestly think she's made it a lot easier than it could have been, though, because she's so good at processing her own emotions. And so I've kind of learned from her, like, how to do that better. Stop making that face.
Okay, so one benefit is that you've learned from her by watching.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like I didn't have the grasp on my emotions and my needs and my preferences before this all started.
Yeah.
And then I kind of had to get a grasp on that and learn how to express it. And it was helpful to have April being like, these are my emotions. And I'd be like, okay. And then that enabled me to find my own, I guess.
Okay, I'm going
Do I
to
have
put
a
you.
turn? No.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Kate, a little bit here. What motivated you? I mean, obviously, you're obviously attracted to Will. That's a given. But I hope that's a given.
I was about to say that giggling sounds like, is it? Is it a given?
I won't look at her.
There's
Chance.
lots
She'll never stop giggling.
There's lots of fish in the sea. What motivated you to want to get involved in something that could be emotionally complex and complicated?
I feel like it was kind of accidental on my part.
Okay.
Like, when we started talking on Tinder, I was just kind of like, oh, I'm jokingly flirting with my friend and it's not going anywhere. And then I was like, wait, I might actually like him. And then everything just kind of started happening. And like, our first date was on a Friday, our second date was on that next Sunday, our third date was the next Tuesday, and our fourth date was a 2-night camping trip the next weekend.
Wow.
So it escalated extremely quickly.
We don't talk about the camping.
We don't talk about the camping.
No, we don't. I don't know. I don't think that I was necessarily motivated to get involved in this sort of thing. It just happened, and then I was dating him, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm involved in this sort of thing now.
Like it or not, you've jumped over the cliff. Well, this is really a cool discussion. I'm enjoying this. You got something there, Candace? You want to?
Definitely. I mean, I'm curious about. I saw where April sent earlier, like a list of what you got, some insider terms. And one of the things you mentioned was like the Z night, and the hanging out, and you got this the tip, and how Kate and Snap
Tips.
refer to
They
each
just
other.
pointed their fingers and touched them together.
Yeah, I'm interested.
It's a thing they do when they say tips.
Yeah, I'm interested some more in that concept of the tip and Kate and Snacks and like how they interact in each other and like what that is. Like I had not heard that before. I don't know if that's tell me a little bit.
They made it up.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't think that's
that up.
Oh, you're just making shit up now, are you?
Yeah, so I'm interested in.
It's totally
in
gonna be
how
a thing
we-
now because I'm pretty sure Dr. Darrell Ray owns all of polyamory, so it's gonna be spread.
Are you just going to put this up on Urban Dictionary or something?
Yeah,
like that?
yeah.
Oh, I'm
Just
sorry. Are
all
those
these
secret?
upvotes on it?
Are those secret terms?
No.
No. We're just teasing. But Snacks, you should tell them how tips came about.
Okay, so you have like the Z shape, and you have the top bar of the Z. That's me on the upper left, and then April in the upper right, who's attached then to the bottom left, which is Will, and then to the bottom right, that's Kate. Well, what are the upper left and the bottom right points doing? They're not attached to anything else. They're just tips. So that's kind of how that came about. And that came about on a camping trip, which we do not discuss.
Yeah. They've kind of got a little tip dance going on.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have crossed the line here. A camping trip we can't discuss. You know what the next question is going to be. And you don't know, go to the whole details, but what's the significance of this camping trip we can't discuss? Or is it significant? Maybe it's not.
Oh, it's hugely significant. Do you want me to talk about it or you?
I can talk about
Okay.
it. So,
Will's going to talk.
the camping trip was our fourth date.
Fourth date, yeah.
Fourth date. And that was the first time that all of us were going to be in the same place since we started. Kate and I started dating, and at this point, April, I don't think fully realized how deep the jealousy emotions were, and we hadn't done enough discussion, and we hadn't established the communication methods and resources and tools yet, and so it was just kind of a giant clusterfuck of emotions for certainly 3 out of the 4 of us. I don't know how Snacks was doing on this trip. And mix into this, like, we're surrounded by like a bunch of the rest of our friend group who have their own drama going on. And like, I got heat stroke during this trip. It was just a nightmare all around. So it's a little like post-traumatic.
Yeah.
So we tend not to talk about it.
Okay.
We jokingly say we don't talk about it. It's
Yeah.
We talk about it.
Clearly
We talk
just
about it all
talked
the
about
time.
it.
Every day.
Talk about it all the time.
I suspected that. You were lying to me, weren't you?
Well, we were just about to let that slide. 2 therapists sitting here about to let a secret slide.
Oh boy. Okay, so I'm gonna. Oh, go ahead, Candace. I'm sorry.
I did. I had one thing, and it just really struck me. I mean, it kind of really struck a chord. And I think, Will, you said it earlier in our conversation. You were saying about working or dealing with April's feelings, and you said how you were working on not owning her feelings, but at the same time being careful not to add to them or not hurt them any further, or like, if I mean, I have my ideas of what that means or how I interpret that, but expand on that a little bit more, because that really touched me. This idea of I'm not going to own your feelings, but at the same time I do want to honor them and respect them and make sure that I don't add to them.
The feelings are valid, but they're not justified. So like the feeling of, in this example, jealousy, like she's feeling jealousy. That is a valid feeling, whether or not, it's justified in that, like, what I'm doing isn't, wrong or bad or, whatever. Like, she is having this feeling of jealousy, and so you have to treat it as a valid feeling because that's what she's feeling. In terms of not exacerbating it, making it worse, more mindful in just being more mindful in the amount of, or in the amount and type of information that gets shared. Because when April and Snacks were dating, there was a lot of very open communication with, about, like what they do and, things like that. And we found out that, that same type of communication had to be a little more restricted, when I was telling April about, what Kate and I were doing. And so, like, respecting the feeling of jealousy and what's, what is making it worse, in that way. So, just, finding the right, level of communication. Because, obviously, like, you want to have communication about certain things, but
so there's a lot of mindfulness on your
there's
part
also
as well.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yes.
I think that the level of communication she had with you about her relationship to Snacks seemed normal, and I'm guessing seemed like, okay, I can do that too. And was it surprise? I'm guessing a surprise to you when you found out, oh no, I can't do that. She doesn't want that level of communication. Was that a surprise to you?
It was a little surprising.
Was it distressing? What, like, did it frustrate you to go like, well, that's not fair. You got to talk about all the sex that you guys had. Talk about the good fucking I'm having. No, that's not a funny joke. Still, I'm sorry. April.
It was a little. I don't know if it was distressing. I don't think it was distressing. It was just, it did feel a little weird that, there was, it's kind of like a one-way communication. But, like once we've kind of figured it out and established what information was necessary and what information was
triggering, I'm guessing.
Triggering, and what information was not triggering. It just that is the level of information that is that needs to be shared to give April the space,
right,
where she's not being triggered all the time,
right.
Although she does love triggering herself. Going back to that whole thing where she loves processing stuff.
Yeah, right. Well, it was what I'm actually hearing, and maybe we haven't used this word yet. It was confusing to you until you guys were able to clarify that. And because what I was operating on was the type of communication that April had with me about her relationship with snacks. One of the things you hear in the poly world, especially when two of the people are married, is that one person, one or more of the metamors, the tips, the tips feel like they are the tips. They're out there, and there's less connection, perhaps, to in this case, April and Will. So that's it just comes with the territory. When in our culture we got two people who are married, they've got a contractual marriage agreement, but the other two don't. I'm curious how you. I'm looking at Snacks and Kate now. How do you feel about being the tips, being out there and? I don't know. You're the guy. You guys are the ones that came up with that, not me. This is not a poly term that I ever heard before.
Yeah. This is to be honest, I think it's great. I get all of the benefits of dating somebody on a regular basis without having them snuggle me all night. So, this is everything I could have hoped for, really. I get to have my own space, and everything is good involving that. And if you don't really have those awkward conversations where one person has to, the awkward expectation rather, where one person has to be your everything, one person has to fulfill all the communication styles that you need based around what feelings you're experiencing. It's where they can kind of use it as almost like a grab bag of talking to different people for different things.
So you see a lot of upside and very little downside, it sounds like, from your perspective, Snacks.
From my perspective, it would have a downside to it if I was a jealous person. But to be honest, I haven't really ran into a bunch of those feelings yet, because I realized that I'm just I'm not on a relationship escalator. It is what this is, and it's very fun, and we both enjoy it. We both enjoy spending time with each other, and we both love each other. Aww. And that's really what matters.
You bitch.
Oh, you bitch. You're the bitch.
Aww.
Hey, there's one term you just used here, and I think it's an important concept, and I actually haven't talked much about it in my own podcast, but the relationship escalator. Tell the listeners what that means, because it's an important concept.
Sure thing. Yeah. Well, for most standard monogamous relationships, the expectation is there for you to get on the escalator, and you're supposed to ride it all the way up. You're going to stops at the floor that's for dating, the floor you move in with each other, the floor you get married, and then sometimes you take that escalator down all the way down to divorce. It just depends. A lot of people feel there's an expectation for them to get on that escalator and take it to the top stop. Well, there's lots of great things. There's lots of great stores on those other floors.
Right.
So, if I'm personally, I'm comfortable just hanging out kind of in the dating and the long-term dating aspect of it.
Okay.
I don't really feel a personal need of jumping through the hoops of signing a piece of paper that says to the state government that you are you enter into a legally binding contract with another person. That's my personal opinion. Yeah. But also like,
and also we can't live together.
Not legally.
We
no.
would kill each other.
Oh yeah. April and I have talked about this numerous times. If we were on the escalator together, like, we're very reasonable people, but we would not be happy people.
Right.
I am just an outward slob, Darrell. It is bad.
Well, I think that's self-aware on your part to understand and know that about yourself. And, if you like it in the second or third floor, fine. But our culture doesn't allow that. Our culture keeps saying, why aren't you married? Why aren't you having children? That escalator up there. I was married my first marriage was 18 years, and people say you had a failed marriage. No, it was successful for 18 years. I got 2 kids and 2 great-grandkids. How's that a failure? That just pisses me off that people use that notion, and because that's a piece of that elevator thing. So, Kate, let's hear what your perspective is on being a tip.
I think my favorite part about it is that there's a lot less wondering where you stand when you're dating a married guy. Again, with the escalator, like Snacks was talking about, if Will and I were dating monogamously and getting on the escalator, we would have broken up by now. There's no way I would marry this guy.
Can we have another podcast and find out why?
Yeah.
I'm just
It's a pretty short list. I'm always willing to talk about why I won't marry him. So.
You'll tell all of our friends
so many reasons
every time we go out. Yeah.
I like it. I think entering into polyamory I've ostensibly been monogamously dating Will. I haven't dated anyone else since we started dating. I think that's the least stressful way to do it. I never had to worry about anything, and it was nice being friends with my boyfriend's wife because I could ask her stuff about him.
And she has to put up with it, right?
Yeah. And I'm also really glad that Snacks and April were already a thing when I started dating Will, because it was really nice having someone where I could be like, hey, this issue, did it come up for you guys? And what did you do? And Snacks was helpful in that area in being like, no, that's normal, you're fine.
Interesting.
Which helped.
That's really interesting,
I felt
Kate.
extremely bad.
So you were talking. You talked to Snacks during that time period, or how?
Yeah, he and I had our first heart to heart on the terrible camping trip.
Oh,
behold the power.
That was one of the things I wondered about. Yeah, I was wondering about not necessarily the camping trip, but I was wondering about Kate and Snacks, how you two communicated and, how much of a support, so to speak, you two may or may not, have been to each other throughout this process. And so that's interesting that you
They've talked about getting married.
Yes, we did very logically discuss getting married. It would have really tidied things up.
Yeah.
Because then it would have just been a square and all the ends would have been tied up and everything would have been perfect. Yeah. But we very logically and calmly decided that we probably shouldn't get married.
Yeah. That's a good call.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are we now? That's a very big question. We've been talking about up to now the journey and how you got here. I'm kind of curious about where are you emotionally now, and where do you guys see yourselves in the future? If there's anything to talk about there.
I think I'm in a pretty good place after being through hell. Thanks to Kate.
I'm sorry, I feel so bad.
You're ruining their marriage.
You're my home record.
You're my favorite.
Look at this home, I've wrecked it.
Yeah, it's so wrecked. Yeah, it's been a really tough trip for me, and I feel like I've been in a much better place the last maybe month and a half or 2 months or so. And it's still a little rough. Like, there's still things I don't want to hear about yet, or like, but I'm pretty fucking content with how far I've come, and I'm really grateful for having Kate in Will's life, and I know that they have a really good time together and that they're good for each other, even though they're not going to get married. No. And I know that they're having a lot of fun. I know it's helping Will grow as a person. So I feel a lot of thankfulness, and I feel a lot of gratefulness for where I am, and I know that there's still some room for growth as well too. I found that something that really helped me get over that final hump, it's a sex joke, to help me get over that. What's been really, really helpful, for given what my fears are to connect with Kate. Like, and I was kind of surprised by that, because I call her the evil seductress ever since our podcast before, when I told you that.
Yeah, we remember that.
Yeah, so I affectionately term her evil seductress. Sometimes I call her evil, sometimes I call her seductress, sometimes both. It depends my mood. But being able to connect with her one-on-one has been immensely valuable. We went on a little date like a month and a half ago, two months ago, and it was just us, and I like Kate a lot. Like, it was just like nice to just sit and talk and be like, so you're dating my husband. Let's talk about that. Like, what are you about? Like, and I don't know, mostly we talked, the things I took away from it were, you find him annoying.
That's true.
And that made me feel so good. Like, to know that you weren't like, oh my God, he is my sun and he's my moon, and like, how soon can I murder you and take over your life? Like, it was just, you're just another person who loves him for who he is, and you just don't want to marry him. And so I get to stay there. So I get to stay there in my position. So it kind of like took the threat away, and it helped me to see you as a human and as someone who I would want to spend time with. So why the fuck wouldn't Will?
Well, because I'm awesome.
Because you're awesome, and you know it. Clap your hands. And so anyway, that's where I am emotionally. I've made a lot of progress, and it's thanks to Kate and her willingness to show up and be with me to hash out my feelings, as everyone wants to just rip me apart today, apparently, for having feelings and want to talk about them. That's fine. But it's been hugely productive to have Kate show up and be willing to be there for me, and that's a huge reason why I've gotten to move forward recently. So I'm in a very positive, I have a very positive perspective on all of us, and I like being the Z. I imagine the Z is going to expand in the short to long term future. It may change, shape, but I think together we've done a lot of work and built up a lot of trust, and I think we're ready for whatever comes. And I kind of see them as my own little family, and that feels really safe. And even though one of my family is an evil seductress who's trying to ruin my marriage.
Trying really hard, it's not working.
Yeah, but even still, it's lovely, and I know that I'm loved despite what my feelings tell me. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I just feel very positive about the future and very grateful for where we are in our life and what our tips have given us as far as companionship and growth and stuff. So yeah, that's how I feel. I think the rest of everyone here hates me, so I'll let them talk now.
Well, it sounds like, Kate, you're an utter miserable failure as an evil seductress, but okay.
I know, I've really been trying to ruin their marriage, and like, they're still married. I've been trying for like 8 months, and I'm obviously not accomplishing my ultimate goal.
You need to be
stealing
eviler.
him so that I can't marry him.
Be more evil.
Or so I cannot marry him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I tried to ruin their marriage so hard they ended up moving.
Yeah, that's true.
A different house.
Yeah, working in the home industry, you got us a new house that's big and helped us with that, and you're awful because of that.
Yeah, I'm terrible at that.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I hate this house. I hate how the sun comes in and how beautiful it is.
Good.
I think one of the things you just said there, April, that I thought was absolutely beautiful was the way that you said about the evil seductress. Was that, ultimately you realize that she is actually a beautiful, wonderful person, and that you enjoy spending time with her. So why wouldn't Will? And now that once you realize how great of a person she really is, and that, okay, no, she actually loves me too. Like, it's possible for her to love Will and love me and not actually want to tear us apart, even though she still is a evil seductress, right? That's okay. But that's beautiful. Like, I thought that's actually, pretty beautiful to say, that I realized that she's great, and why wouldn't Will want to spend time with her? Because she's awesome. So that's cool. That's sweet.
She's tearing up over here, just so you know. I just want to draw attention to that.
I'm not crying even a little.
Her eyes are leaking.
She's lying.
I'm not crying. You're crying.
I'm not crying. I'm just leaking.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm a therapist. Is what I do. If I don't pull a couple of tears by the end of the hour, I'm not.
You're a failure.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're not doing your job. Yeah. That's fair.
I'm curious about, we haven't heard one connection's not been discussed much, and that's Will and Snacks. How do you guys relate to each other? If at all. It's not required, of course.
No, we're not related.
No.
Not at all.
You guys are in love.
He's all right.
Yeah. He did get us this house, which is good.
So like,
I don't know. It's been pretty easy and chill.
Who is this?
I don't think bromance, but
No, it's just
this is Will.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Just this guy that's at my house occasionally.
fucking your wife.
Well,
sleeping on your side of the bed when you got to get close.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good meta.
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty great meta.
What makes him great?
April's pointing at herself. And he is a great meta in that he does support April, and he does offer her things that I don't, and that's okay. And he also is really supportive of April and I in our relationship. And so that's always nice that, like he's not the evil seductor, trying to steal April or murder me or whatever.
Or so you think.
Or so I think. He's had a year.
Your life insurance hasn't gotten high enough yet.
Like whenever Snacks and I are out, he'll find something like we'll be at a grocery store and be like, "Oh, hey, look at that! You should get that for Will." I'm like, "Who are you working for here?" So like, Snacks is constantly watching out for Will. It's kind of sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was this one time we went to April and I went to a Asian grocery store in search of tapioca, so she could make tapioca pudding for Will's birthday. Yeah, it's Will.
It's pronounced Will.
Will.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
It's actually spelled HWILL.
Yeah. Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Go on.
So, anyway, so I was like, ooh, here's tapioca pearls. You should get these ones for him. And she was like, yeah, I was going to make that anyway. Perfect. Now I don't have to make an extra trip.
No, that's how it went. But
That's how I remember it going, because I'm awesome.
no, I remember getting the tapioca and you being like, you melted. You were like, that is so sweet. You're going to make tapioca for his birthday? And then you cried, I think, for like 10 hours, maybe.
Yeah.
We're getting distracted. Sorry.
Just the way the light just shined off the tapioca.
No, you talk about it. You talk about Will.
Yeah, well, he's cool. He's got cats, and the cats are good. We like to play we both like to play video games independently, and we're pretty similar people in the ways that we're both intellectually oriented. We have very, very different energy levels, which I think is really helpful in like supporting April. Ultimately, like if we hung out at a bar, yeah, things would be great. Like he's a great person to have in like a group setting. It's not really something that I don't think either one of us would really say that we would want to go out and have a beer with the person on their own. Yeah. Just because we're very divergent energy levels, I think, is probably the best way of describing that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, he's, I'm not trying to ruin their marriage. I would not try to take his place on an escalator.
I don't want you on my escalator.
Yeah, I'm not allowed on that one.
You got off at floor 2 then. That's
yeah.
You guys are using pseudonyms. It seems like Snacks is a pretty appropriate pseudonym for you because you're like, dude, I just keep it easy, man. Like, I don't need like 4-course meals. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just give me some snacks. Like, keep it easy.
And what's a party without snacks?
Exactly.
Right. Right.
Just bring the extra life.
It's actually a name that I've had since high school even. So like that's just kind of my personality. So I figured, yeah, we'll just use that. It was my roller derby name even. So if people happen to find me via that, I don't really care.
So they really love you. Yeah.
No, if they're that determined, they've earned it at that point.
Yeah. So one of the big reasons I do this podcast is I want people to be able to tell their own story, and I want my listeners to hear how other people solve the problems of life with respect to sexuality, of course. We haven't even touched on the whole religion thing. We're not going to. That's a whole nother can of worms. It's another podcast. Okay,
we don't allow that here.
Okay, very good, very good. That's a good rule.
What, religion or discussion of religion?
Yeah, either one right now.
Okay, cool.
It's just too much more. I would love to ask each one of you a bunch of stuff, but that's not where we're going today. What I do want to ask, though, is, well, I think this discussion, reflecting back on what we just talked about for a little over an hour, is how you have approached the issues that every poly person's going to have to face in some way, shape, or form, and how you solve the problems, or how you are solving the problems, because I don't think you've got them all solved necessarily, and the problems may change or mutate over the next, who knows, however long you want to stay involved. So my question would be, what would you tell the listeners, and any or all of you can speak to this, that you've learned from having gone through this? That would be question number one. What have you learned? And second, what would you advise other people, if you had some advice for people who are exploring poly or in poly, who are experiencing the problems you have? So what have you learned, and what's your advice to other people? And I'd be glad to hear from each one of you.
This is Snacks. I think that it's important to realize that polyamorous relationships, for the most part, are monogamous relationships with just a couple extra wrinkles to them. Sure, those wrinkles can be, big deal-breaky things, but, they're not that much different from restrictions that other relationships have, because you're just challenging a couple of already existing assumptions regarding relationships. You're saying that, yeah, it's possible where I can love more than one person, and it's possible for my partner to love more than one person. That's really the only difference. There are certainly struggles regarding jealousy that you'll run into, and it's just inherent because we all grow up in a monogamous-centered culture. But the strongest thing to do is just communicate with each other, touch base frequently. Even if there is nothing new to discuss, it doesn't hurt to have like a set time to touch base with your partners regarding certain things, certain challenges that you might be having, and avoid the one penis policy. I would say that's probably the biggest one. That's gonna be a danger. And don't confuse really triads with polyamory, I would probably go with, because that's just like, it's more unicorn hunting at that point, in my personal opinion. And that's just a little bit different than polyamory in my eyes.
Okay. Interesting.
I might disagree with that, but that's okay.
That's fair.
And that's his advice, though. We'll just go with that. So who's next?
That's fair. I can go. I figured out what I wanted to say. So I would say, and I'm so excited to say this, that I think the thing that I've learned is that I am more than capable of handling this shit. Like, I am fucking made for this shit. Like, yeah, I've got jealousy, but I am doing a really good job. Dr. Darrell Ray wants to interview me twice to hear me talk about how good I am with handling my feelings, and I just impressed the socks off of 2 psychologists, and all of my poly group thinks I'm amazing because I help them talk about their feelings. And I also was on another podcast under my real name, Everyone's Agnostic, and they were also incredibly impressed, and those are people that I look up to, and they were impressed with me, and that made me feel really good, and I feel competent as fuck, and I have not always felt that way. I had to take a lot of therapy and get to a really low before I got to this point. And I'm just starting to understand how fucking capable I am. And that's what I've learned. And I'm really, really proud of myself. And I like hearing myself talk about this because I don't know how else to say it. I'm just incredibly proud of myself. And I have not always had the best self-confidence. And I've just seen myself shine through this. This is a kind of a challenge that has made me feel really strong. And so then I would say that the piece of advice I'd have, and I'll reference this person who found your podcast and heard me speak, and he also heard me speak on Everyone's Agnostic, and then he stalked me on Facebook and added me and said that he recently opened up his marriage with his wife. And so I've been counseling him and yelling at him for the last couple of months. And the piece of advice I keep giving him is to be gentle with himself. Mostly I'm projecting all over him because I just see myself when I first started seeing Will and Kate date, just struggling with that jealousy and the circular self-talk, the negative self-talk. And it's been helpful for me to yell at him and say, it's okay, be kind to yourself. You just started poly. You're deconstructing the world of monogamy. You are doing something that we have not been trained to do or understand, and you are unraveling all of this bullshit. Be so kind to yourself, and be kind when you hear all these toxic thoughts in your head, and just notice them kindly and just try to mindfully walk through them and figure out where they come from and what are those fears behind them, so that you can figure out if and how you want to manage them or how you want to deal with them. So that's my advice for others, to just keep showing up and being honest and probably unapologetic for the experiences that they're going to go through. If they're just starting poly, if they're dealing with thoughts of jealousy or whatever, I would say don't apologize for having those feelings. Those are absolutely natural. Just show up for them, though. Communicate, talk about them. Try not to project them on your partner, but own them and walk through them and be mindful of them and try to grow through them. So I would, that's my biggest piece of advice. If you can just focus on communication, I think you'll go a long way, and not projecting. But, that's a big ask. So I don't know. That's worked for me. Okay, that's all. I'm done ranting.
All right.
Soapbox, pick it up, put it over here.
I have no idea what I've learned. I don't know. I don't know.
That's
I honestly don't know what I've learned. I mean, other than how to communicate better, because in any monogamous relationship I was in before this, I was never really, I wouldn't talk about my feelings. I just kept it all inside, didn't cry out loud. But now I have to talk about my feelings, and it's different and weird, but also I think good and helpful.
Is it because I made you?
Well, you made me, and then also, I knew you were talking about your feelings all the time, and so I was like, I also need to talk about my feelings, because otherwise Will's not going to think I have feelings. And he needs to know what I'm going through. He has to suffer with me.
Well, didn't you also learn that it's okay to swipe right on Tinder on a married man when you're both at the same party?
I did learn that it's okay to swipe right on someone that you're at a party with, even though their wife is also at that party.
That's a major learning. I don't know too many people have learned how to do that. Of course, you first got to be on Tinder to do it, I guess, right?
Well,
So what advice do you have?
honestly, just communication. Like, I know it's cliche, but being able to be like, this is what's happening, and I just want you to know about what's happening, and like, what are your thoughts about what's happening? I think that's my main advice, is to just keep respectful and open communication. Because really, like, if you're not talking to each other, it's never gonna work out.
Yeah, good.
Because you can't deal with feelings of jealousy if you're not talking about them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Will?
All right. What I've learned. I don't know, I've learned a lot about like not owning other people's feelings, and I don't know. Just lots of stuff around that. Communication of feelings and not owning them, and giving people space around them. What I would tell people who are thinking about poly is that it's going to be hard, and maybe not in the ways that you expect. There are going to be surprises. Like, something's going to happen, and like all of a sudden, like, oh God, like I'm not okay with that, or you unexpectedly have feelings that you didn't think you were going to have. Like, I didn't have any real jealousy issues. There's a couple of times there's just like a little bit of jealousy, and it's like, no, my feelings, like, I don't want to say my feelings are bullshit, but like the reason I'm feeling my feelings is bullshit. So, just, but then, when I started dating, just all of a sudden, April's having all of these jealousy feelings, and, that's unexpected. I don't know if it was unexpected, but
No, we knew it was going to happen.
But just like all of the unexpected, surprising challenges that come up, and you're going to have to show up for them if you want it to work. And you are going to have difficult conversations, and if you are not prepared to do that, maybe you shouldn't try poly.
Or maybe you shouldn't try relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing, Darrell.
This is not a poly issue, having difficult conversations. Yeah, but I think you're right.
That's fair. And like, what was I going to say? I got distracted. And also, not all types of relationships are for everybody. And like, if you are happy with what you have, more power to you, because you're happy with what you have. Don't ever feel pressure to do or be something else. We're poly, but if you're happy with your, super monogamous, marriage, that's fine too.
Good. Yeah. Right.
I mean, I would also say, don't really come at it from a perspective of, if you're unhappy with your marriage, don't think that poly is going to fix it.
Sure it will.
I mean, that's like the same reason people give sometimes for having kids. It's like, we're having an unhappy marriage. Let's have a baby.
We actually have an acquaintance that claims that he tried poly when he was married before. I was like, no, you didn't try poly. You let your wife fuck other people in hopes of saving your marriage.
In his particular instance.
In that particular instance.
Yeah. But also, I would add, if I may add to your thought, that even if you are happy with what you have, you could, we were happy with what we had.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
we chose to open our relationship to add to it, not to fill it in, but why not? Like, why shouldn't you have more? Because we're greedy, middle-class white Americans. Yeah.
You want it all.
We want it all.
Yeah. And we're definitely in a position where, like, we don't really face any consequences for choosing to, be poly. We don't really face any consequences for choosing to be atheist. So, like, we have a lot of privilege and freedom in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, they're whispering.
Yeah, we were whispering here. We were coordinating. Sorry, I should have muted my Hey, Will said something.
That's okay.
Will said something. I want to just follow up a little bit on that with my own 2 cents here. The question is, he said it's hard. And my question always is, why is it hard? If you had been born in a different culture that encouraged or taught children how to be children and young adults, that poly relationships were normal, would you be having those same hard, difficult conversations? And my guess is many people would not. Some would be, but many people would not. It's how you were trained early on that the escalator is the only way to go. I like that metaphor. Snacks. So the escalator is the only way to go, and what we're saying is no, there's other ways. You can get on the escalator if you want, but you don't have to. And this notion that you don't have to get on the escalator is really quite a radical notion in our culture, but it's not really that radical if you look at it from maybe some others. In my book Sex and God, I write about the Mongolian culture. They don't seem to get on the escalator there. And the Muoso culture in China, they don't seem to get on the escalator there. So it's not a natural. We're not monogamous species. We don't have to go that route if we don't want to. And I'm happy to see people like you figuring it out. There's no textbook. There are books. You guys read more than 2, I think you mentioned, in The Ethical Slut. They're great resources for the listeners that want to learn more. And I also want to head one thing off at the pass here. I can imagine some listeners saying, well, there's been a lot of poly on this podcast. Is this podcast about poly? No, this podcast is about learning how to deal with relationships and sexuality. This is just one way to do it. And I think what Snacks said is it's kind of monogamy with, what'd you call it?
Wrinkles.
With wrinkles, yeah.
A couple of extra wrinkles.
Extra wrinkles.
Damn, Snacks.
I'm not sure I want any more wrinkles. I got plenty of wrinkles. But thanks anyway, Snacks. Candace, you got something you want to throw in there?
I think of course, I keep saying, I think the way that you guys all talk about each other is beautiful. I know y'all don't want to say it yourselves, but I'm going to say it for you. You have a lot of really intense things that you've worked through. And I think that now that you're on this end, it's really clear that you've come, where you're at right now has, you guys have produced something really beautiful. And I, of course, as a therapist, one of the things that really stood out to me again from the first podcast with April was that you mentioned when some of this stuff was getting really difficult for you, that you did start seeing a therapist, and you specifically sought out one that was poly friendly. So Darrell, you didn't ask for my advice, right? But I think that, as people are, trying to overcome these hurdles, if they are looking for a therapist, a poly-friendly therapist is a big deal. And I guess I'm saying that from a therapist, like, let's say, as an atheist therapist, right? As a therapist who happens to be an atheist. Anything outside of the norm, therapists are really bad about. If you don't, if I can't identify with you, then I can't counsel you either. And so I could imagine not that if you have a therapist who's not poly friendly or who doesn't understand poly or whatever, that it could be tragic. You know, you could end up traumatized with that sort of a therapist. And so I think it's really good that you had the insight to look for that sort of a therapist. I think if anybody is poly and that's what they're looking for, a therapist to help them work through that shit, then they definitely going to need to look specifically for that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good thing. This is a good thing, and my parents asked me to reconsider my choice, and they can just fuck off. And this is a beautiful thing that we've got going on, and I am just grateful, and I feel good about myself, and I like the men that I have in my life, and I like having sex with them, and I like my tip, or you're not my tip, but I like my meta, my evil seductress. She's the best, and more to come. More to come. Ooh, who knows what's gonna happen?
Well, I think like this is probably for a future episode. If you want us back,
He loves us. Every episode is gonna be about us.
Yeah,
This is our podcast.
Yeah, he said it's my podcast now.
Yeah, I think there in the not too distant future there will be expansion to the Z.
Oh, okay. So we're gonna have a W now. Next
We're still gonna call it a Z though.
We're still gonna be.
We're just gonna add like serifs and like.
Yeah, like filigree, like but so yeah.
Maybe an umlaut if things get lucky. Who knows?
Umlaut.
Yeah.
A zoomlaut.
A zoomlaut.
Yeah.
I would say another really cool thing that we did recently is we went out, all four of us, because we were just talking about maybe, I think both of the ladies here are interested in expanding in some way or the other and having different partners. And so it was time to kind of have a discussion about, all right, so what do we need to connect about as far as like sexual contact? What are the expectations? This is like a conversation I just did not expect to have. But if there's a lot of people having sex with different people, but we're all connected, what are the ethics involved in that? And can you sit four people down and have a conversation about what's expected? You can. So we did that. So we went out to eat the other day, or no, we just had a beer. But that's relevant to the conversation. And so we just kind of drew up oh, Jesus, something.
That was my fault.
Way to go, Kate.
Sorry.
So we drew up this agreement about like sexual
best practices
and like expectations. We came up with a term called ZCOM, which means like if it's a piece of information that is required to be disseminated to the entire Z in a particular fashion. In that, for example, each of us needs to get an STD test every 6 months. And the person who gets a test needs to tell their partner the results. And then that partner needs to tell their partner. And that partner needs to tell the other partner. And so that's called a ZCOM.
Right.
And it's a pretty neat document. And I thought it was pretty magical. But the Facebook group for poly people just poo-pooed it and said I was STD shaming everyone. But I'm not supposed to give them any more energy, so says Snacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there I went when I did it, though.
And it's like we did that in, because we all want to like continue to be healthy and safe, and and so like we came up with what was acceptable and reasonable to all of us, for that. So
excellent,
and it's now in place for like if Kate starts dating somebody, like there is a process in place. It's not like, well, what do I do now? No, it's like, no, like here's what happens now.
There's protocols to follow.
There are protocols.
Best practices, yes.
Yeah.
good, and everybody's agreed to it. So that's a really good, above the board, ethical way to proceed. I love it. Love it.
And we even have a sex jail.
Yeah.
Sentence to sex jail if they violate rules.
Darrell's getting all excited.
It's not as sexy as
I didn't know you guys were kinky
It's a
too.
metaphorical jail.
You have to tell him what it is now. He's all excited.
It's a metaphorical jail.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not working for it with inselling the person for involuntary celibacy. Yeah. So, like, if they end up, like grossly violating certain terms,
Like fluid bonding.
fluid bonding with a one-night stand, for example.
Yeah.
There would be like a period of time. There's like best practices or practices in place before reintroduction to
Right.
the pool. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to
You
describe.
got to drain the pool.
Yeah, you got to drain the pool first. That's the only way you can get the pee out of the pool.
God.
You can put in cleaner, but that's not, this pee's still there.
This is really good fodder for the
Drain the swamp.
You're welcome.
They have an outtake section, right?
Just at the beginning.
I mean, if there's an outtake section, I feel that it's going to be me talking, and like the parts of the entire podcast are just going to be you three.
Yes.
I'm just going to be the outtakes.
Okay, let's focus now.
Well, we do need to wind it up
can't
here
tell me.
because I try to keep it to an hour, but
Yeah.
with you guys, that's impossible. But I should have known that from
like-
just my earlier
like
experience
4
with April.
Rolls.
So, to wind this up, let me just reinforce for the benefit of our listeners. I think there's been some really cool discussion going on here. I think this problem-solving methodologies are really good, and the way you're being proactive as a group to make decisions. That's really unusual, and don't let anybody shame you about that. That's just good common sense. So, I also love how I think I've heard all of you have learned, whether you by osmosis or observation of April, you've all kind of learned how to be more mindful of who you are and your thought processes. I mean, Will was mentioning a little bit earlier that he could realize his thinking was bullshit. It wasn't somebody else's problem. It was his own thinking style, and he was being mindful of that. That's really sophisticated, and it's a skill that anybody can learn. I do want to say this. There are some really good mindfulness books out there, and there's several that I recommend. I'll try to put show notes on one of the book I most recommend, but the one I use is not the only one. And learning mindfulness, you can learn it from a therapist. In fact, I would encourage you to go to a therapist and learn it. But you could still learn it, especially key elements of it, by just reading a good mindfulness book. We'll warn you, though, you don't read the book. You practice the book. Every good mindfulness book is really a workbook, and it takes you through exercises in which you do the very things that we've heard some of our group today talking about. How do you pay attention to your thoughts? How do you acknowledge your thoughts without pushing them onto other people or projecting them onto other people? Those are skills that are just not taught anywhere. And yet we know from the psychological studies, and there's an enormous amount of research just in the last 20 years that shows mindfulness is probably the single most effective approach to dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression, dealing with relationship issues, just dealing with life, mostly day-to-day life. So congratulations to all of you on learning some of those skills and practicing them both in your own personal lives and within this group. I would say thanks, Candace, for being with us today and for your participation and questions.
Thank you for having me. Had a blast.
I want to plug her book. I want to plug two things. Candace has an incredibly good book called Ebony Exodus, and it talks about the struggle black women have to face in leaving religion, and it's really eye-opening. And don't think it's just for people who are black. They're not. They're from anybody on this planet probably dealing with some of those issues if you're raised religious. And you have a new book out, or you have a chapter in a new book. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, it's called Women versus Religion: The Case Against Faith and for Freedom. And it was edited by Karen Garst.
Right.
It consists of 13 essays written by different women about their experiences, and it addresses just a variety of issues. So, of course, I talk about the impact of religion on women from the psychological perspective.
Right.
So it's an interesting book. It's coming out.
And Karen Garst is a friend of this podcast. In fact, we've had her on about probably 2 years ago. She was on the podcast talking about her own book. She had her first book. Hey, guys, thanks a lot for being on the podcast. Thanks for listening to the Secular Sexuality podcast today.
We want you to go give yourself a big orgasm today.
Or give somebody else a big orgasm today.
That's great.